Good evening, America. I'm Franklin D. Roosevelt, and welcome to News Drops, a humorous twist when needed, as an add to the news mixology. Let's get into today, Elle.
And I'm L. Lina Roosevelt. Welcome to News Drops TV, where we bring you the stories that matter, and the stories that don't matter. We will just keep bringing the stories.
Our top story tonight comes from the Department of Government Efficiency, where Elon Musk has uncovered what might be the most expensive government oversight in recent memory.
That's right, Frank. According to Musk, the U.S. Treasury has been making annual payments of approximately $100 billion to individuals who don't have social security numbers or even temporary ID numbers.
Let me put that in perspective for our viewers, Elle. That's roughly equivalent to the entire GDP of Slovakia just being handed out to unidentified individuals.
Well, Frank, I suppose when you're spending other people's money, identification becomes optional.
The story gets even more interesting. When Musk asked Treasury officials about potential fraud, the consensus in the room was that about half of these payments, we're talking $50 billion annually, are likely fraudulent.
That's nearly $1 billion every week, Frank. I wonder how many border walls that could have built.
Yeah, or how many of our military service veterans could have housing and provided improved doctor care. And now, in what seems like perfect timing, a U.S. district judge has blocked DOJ from accessing Treasury Department payment records, confirming the deep state stamp of approval of fund misallocations. Can't wait to hear the reasons for blocking access of this information. Like, why would a POTUS ever need to see how taxpayers' money is spent? The press shouldn't worry about that when there's bigger things to focus on, like what pronouns Zem should use or handshake sessions with comedian actors turned dictators.
Fascinating how quickly they can move to prevent transparency, isn't it? When it's time to send out the checks, no ID needed. But when someone wants to look at the books...
Well, Elle, as my grandmother used to say, nothing moves faster than a bureaucrat protecting their mistakes.
Speaking of mistakes, this comes just as DOJ has been making waves by dismantling USAID, affecting thousands of staff members worldwide.
And for those keeping score at home, that's $100 billion to unknown recipients. But we couldn't afford to keep our embassy staff properly funded. Or get aid to East Palestine, Ohio, for train derailments, Maui for disastrous fires, or North Carolina after Hurricane Helene.
You really can't make this stuff up, Frank.
Moving to our next story, President Trump is taking a bold stance on transparency, demanding full disclosure from the Secret Service regarding 2 assassination attempts during his campaign.
This is quite remarkable, Frank. The president was literally shot in the ear during a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, and Americans are just now getting the full story.
That's correct, Elle. The first attempt was by 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks. And before anyone asks, yes, that's his real name.
Sometimes life writes its own headlines, doesn't it? What's particularly interesting is that Crooks was found with 6 cell phones. 6. How could he afford it?
Probably funded by the Treasury Department of fund misallocations.
And just 2 months later, we had 59-year-old Ryan Roth, who apparently thought the best retirement plan was camping out at Trump International Golf Club with a rifle. President Trump believes the Secret Service has been withholding information due to pressure from the Biden administration. His exact words were, "No more holding back because of Biden."
You know, Elle, there's something refreshing about a president who actually wants to know who tried to kill him. You know, unlike all the recent presidents that haven't been interested at all about who was behind their attempts.
Especially when you consider that one of these suspects had multiple foreign apps on their phones. That seems like something worth investigating.
The president was quite direct about it, saying, "I'm entitled to know." And frankly, no pun intended, it's hard to argue with that logic. Frankly, I like using my name like that.
Sure, Frank, now you're just hot-dogging it. Or franking it. Either way, it's time to put a bun around it.
And now to a story that might have you checking your calendar to make sure we're still in America, Ellie. Democratic officials across the country are openly defying federal immigration law.
That's right, Frank. New Attorney General Pam Bondi is facing resistance from several sanctuary jurisdictions that seem to think federal laws are more like suggestions.
Take Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, for example. "I want to speak directly to people who are undocumented. We love you. We care about you," Frey said at a news conference. "In the city of Minneapolis, we will stand up for you and we will do anything in our power to help because you're not an alien. In our city, you're a neighbor." He then goes on to say, "Our police officers will not be cooperating with federal law enforcement around federal immigration law," he added. "We enforce state and local laws here in Minneapolis, and we will do so to the best of our ability. But as for cooperation with ICE, the answer is no." He recently declared, and I quote, "Our police officers will not be cooperating with federal law enforcement around federal immigration law."
All of his gushy love sounds caring, but he's lost on how it all gets paid, community disruptions, and multiple other complications. How many illegals will he be inviting to camp in his yard or have over for a family meal? And is he serious about publicly disobeying federal law? Now that's some great theater. That's why we elect you leaders to show us how to disobey laws. How convenient that these same officials were lecturing us about being defenders of democracy just a few years ago.
And it gets better, Elle. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy actually bragged about harboring someone above his garage.
You know what's particularly interesting about this, Frank? These are the same Democratic mayors who've been crying about their cities being overwhelmed by migrants.
Indeed, New York City Mayor Eric Adams just requested an additional $1.1 billion for migrant services. That's on top of the $6.9 billion they've already spent.
So let me get this straight. They're running out of money to handle migrants, but they're actively opposing efforts to enforce immigration law. So, the Hippocrates don't like the hypocrisy, but they just can't help themselves to not engage in it.
Well, Elle, I wish there was something good I could say about this consistency. Moving on to Capitol Hill, where Democratic Senator Andy Kim is threatening to shut down the government over efficiency.
That's right, Frank. Senator Kim is suggesting that Democrats might deny Republicans the votes needed to fund the government if the Trump administration continues reshaping federal agencies.
Let me make sure I understand this correctly. Democrats are threatening to shut down the government because the administration is making it more efficient.
Nothing scares a bureaucrat quite like efficiency, Frank. Where do folks like Kim get their ill logic? It's like driving at 80 on the freeway, consuming fuel inefficiently, but rather than trying to reserve fuel and just slow down a bit, you'd rather just stop the car and shut it off. Now you're saving fuel but not going anywhere, which is exactly what officials like Kim go nowhere. Fast.
Kim told Meet the Press that the administration is trying to dismantle the government. Does he really think like that? Though I have to wonder if streamlining bloated agencies really counts as dismantling.
Particularly interesting timing given that DOJ has already shown significant waste in various departments.
You know, Elle, there's something almost poetic about threatening to shut down the government to protect government waste. Seems like some rocks are getting turned over and the sunlight is exposing the fungus underneath, which may lead to drying things up and killing off the mold. Kim seems to be part of the fungus. It'd be nice to dry him up. In international news tonight, President Trump has confirmed direct communication with Russian President Vladimir Putin regarding the ongoing conflict in Ukraine.
This marks the first known direct conversation between Putin and a U.S. president since early 2022, Frank, and it could signal a potential breakthrough in peace negotiations.
The president told the New York Post that Putin wants to see people stop dying, and emphasized his own commitment to ending what he called this damn thing.
Now, critics might say this is controversial, but let's remember, we're talking about potentially ending a conflict that's claimed thousands of lives.
And unlike previous administrations, Trump seems to have a concrete plan, though he's keeping the details close to the vest for now.
As he should. Sometimes the best negotiations happen away from the Twitter spotlight, don't they?
In a bold move from the White House tonight, President Trump has revoked security clearances from several prominent Democrats and critics.
That's right, Frank. The list includes former Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg, and New York AG Letitia James, among others.
Interesting timing, Ellie, considering this comes just a day after the president stripped former President Biden of his security clearance.
Well, Frank, as the president put it regarding Blinken bad guy, take away his passes. Sometimes simplicity is best. Lest we forget Blinken's contribution to the debacle pullout in Afghanistan. 13 American troops' lives lost and millions of armaments left behind for the Taliban to auction off at their terrorist trade shows. What a piece of work.
The move has raised eyebrows in Washington, but let's remember, Biden set this precedent himself in 2021 when he cut off President Trump's access to classified briefings. So, what would Bragg and James be needing with national security clearances anyway? They're state employees. Seems like a good move to possibly stop some of the George Soros feed line of information.
And referring back to Biden, Trump cited the recent Hur report in his decision to revoke security clearance for him, noting Biden's poor memory issues.
A point could be made, he won't remember anything anyway. But the counter to that would be, he wouldn't know who he's talking to when sharing sensitive information, and that someone could be an enemy of the state, ultimately in Trump style. Joe, you're fired.
Yeah, it's better to put Joe in the American home with some security detail, because I'm sure Dr. Jill won't be changing his diapers.
Moving to what might be the most interesting immigration story of the day. President Trump has announced he won't be deporting Prince Harry.
Now there's a headline I never thought I'd hear, Frank.
The Duke of Sussex has been in hot water over questions about his immigration forms and past drug use admissions in his memoir, Spare.
But the president had quite the memorable response when asked about potential deportation, saying, "I don't want to do that. I'll leave him alone. He's got enough problems with his wife. She's terrible."
Presidential diplomacy at its finest.
Though he did have kind words for Prince William, calling him a great young man.
I'm going to guess that as an immigrant in the U.S., he won't be leading protests for Middle East politics or engaging in taking over hotels in Colorado or baking Canadian geese in local parks. In a major shakeup of biomedical research funding, the Trump administration has announced significant cuts to overhead costs in research grants.
The National Institutes of Health will now cap indirect costs at 15%, down from the current average of 30%.
And according to Elon Musk, some universities were actually charging up to 60% for overhead.
Nothing like a little sunlight to disinfect wasteful spending. Though predictably, some in academia aren't happy about it.
Of course not, Elle. It's always a crisis when someone suggests maybe, just maybe, we shouldn't be spending more on overhead than actual research. A new CBS YouGov poll released today shows Americans are largely pleased with President Trump's second-term performance so far.
The numbers are quite striking, Frank. 70% of Americans believe Trump is doing exactly what he promised during the campaign.
And his new Department of Government Efficiency is gaining traction, with 51% of Americans supporting DOGE's influence over government spending. Seems the Democrat objectors, such as Chuck Schumer and Maxine Waters, are all uncomfortable with Elon Musk heading up DOGE moreover than what he's discovering as wasteful uses of our tax dollars.
Yeah, it's kind of like someone telling you your house is on fire, but you're not going to listen to him because you just don't like him. Will they ever work just to make relations and government effective? Or just continue with angry tones and petulant whines because they didn't get their way? It's how they reach their younger teenage audience. And there are some concerns about inflation, with 66% wanting more focus on lowering prices.
Well, Elle, after the inflation we've seen these past few years, can you blame them? In an interesting twist of irony tonight, the immigrant advocacy group suing the Trump administration over birthright citizenship has been receiving millions in federal funding.
That's right, Frank. CASA received about $12 million in government grants and contracts in just 1 year.
So they're using taxpayer money to sue the government over immigration policy?
It's like paying someone to punch you in the face, isn't it? Or maybe it's their way of completing a friendship circle, only we'll coin it the I want my way circle.
Moving to California, where part of the state is quite literally moving toward the Pacific Ocean.
NASA reports that the Palos Verdes Peninsula is shifting about 4 inches per week, Frank. Though I suppose that's one way to create oceanfront property.
While we can joke, this is actually a serious situation with FEMA implementing a $42 million buyout program for affected homeowners.
Remember when California falling into the ocean was just a figure of speech?
And finally tonight, Hollywood director Judd Apatow has a message for Trump-supporting stars in Tinseltown.
Because if there's one thing Hollywood needs more of, it's political lectures from directors.
Apatow suggested making shows for MAGA people, proposing The Real Housewives of January 6th.
How original. You know, Frank, for an industry that claims to value diversity, they seem remarkably intolerant of diverse opinions.
And that wraps up our broadcast for tonight. I'm Franklin D. Roosevelt.
And I'm L. Lina Roosevelt. Thank you for joining us on News Drops TV, where we believe in letting you decide what's news and what's just noise. That's it for now. be thankful, and enjoy what you have. It's more than you think. If you liked our content, please give us a like and hit subscribe for more views through the News Drop scope.